Welcome to the Raise podcast. I'm Carol Barwick. We're here to raise your confidence and inspire your creativity. Each episode, we will have a different guest who will be discussing our Raise word. The Raise word is a word that will encourage you or empower you and at times inspire you to explore the word a little more for yourself. Well, good morning, everybody. This is Carol Barwick. Welcome to the Raise podcast. I hope you've been enjoying the episode so far. There have been some really interesting talks about creativity and connection. Today, we're going to talk about something that's a little bit more serious, but there's going to be some amazing things that come out of it. So I'd like to introduce you to Lisa Owens from Hope in Depression. And we're going to be talking about the word overcome today. Welcome, Lisa. How are you doing this morning?
I'm good, thanks, Carol. It's great to be here. Thanks for asking me.
You're welcome. So, Lisa, when it comes to the word overcome, I think sometimes it can be ignored a little bit. It's not a word that we use all the time. What does the word overcome mean to you?
Well, I think it epitomizes what I've managed to do in my journey with depression and anxiety. I've managed to overcome it, and in the midst of it, I didn't feel that was going to happen, but I'm on the other side of it now, and I feel very grateful to be able to say that I overcame it through the tools and techniques that we teach on our course. And ultimately looking back, I can see that God, as a Christian, I believe that God was carrying me through the darkest days. And with his help, I was able to overcome, the worst time in my life. Without a doubt, it is the worst experience I've ever been through, depression and anxiety. And, we talked about that this was going to be the subject, and I looked up the meaning of overcome in preparation for today. And the dictionary says it means to succeed in dealing with a problem or a difficulty. And it also means to defeat an opponent. And, so for me, I can say that I have overcome it. I do feel like I've succeeded and taken this awful experience and given it a purpose so that it can do the same for others.
That's wonderful. I also looked up the meaning, but I didn't see the bit about defeating an opponent. I love that. That is so powerful, isn't it?
Yeah.
Can you take a few minutes to tell us about what that opponent looked like to you?
It looked like hopelessness. It looked like failure. It looked like the end, actually. It looked like the only option sometimes was to not continue living. I thankfully didn't act on that, but suicidal thoughts in the midst of depression and anxiety are a symptom, which, it doesn't get spoken about a lot. So, when you take that pressure off of that thought, it's a part of the illness. But in the midst of it, it looked like a terrifying thought that had popped up in my head. And I didn't want that to be my story. I remember, you're almost a magnet to these stories when you go through these experiences and you hear these negative words and these, the word suicide coming up everywhere. And it's a trigger. And, it felt like it was an attack, really, just this sense of making that the only option. But actually, I needed to overcome it, and I needed to recognize that that's a lie, that wasn't the option, the only option I had. I know this is a really emotional subject, so I maybe don't want to take us that deep so soon. You guide me, Carol, but I have an opinion about suicide that I really would love to share.
Sure. Just before we do that, going back to looking at it as an opponent, when I work in schools, when I do transition, I often talk to the children about their worries, and we look at them like villains, and we look at what they seek to do, what their mission is, and how they want to kind of bring us down. And I think what you're talking about, it's the same thing, isn't it? Ultimately, that enemy wants to break us completely, destroy us. And yet you and your charity bring about this amazing hope. Before we go a little bit deeper down into this whole subject. Tell us a little bit about your charity and how that kind of has developed and evolved.
Yeah, so I started Hope in Depression in October 2013. And I knew that from my experience, what gave me hope was other people saying, I've been there, Lisa, and you can get better. You're going to be all right. And they could give me days of a lifted mood, thinking, they recognized what I was going through. And it was that relatability, really. And so I knew from my experience, and the medical profession didn't really help me in a great way. My GP kind of failed me. So everything I learned by battling through and hanging on to life by my fingertips. So, recognizing that food affects mood and nutrition and exercise and, people you're hanging around, those kind of therapy, medication, all these things were brought into play because I was desperate to stay alive. So when I started the course, it was about bringing a community together that could normalize each other's experience. And that's the power of the course, because the worst thing about depression is we isolate ourselves. We believe that we're the worst case. We believe that we're the only one that feels as bad as we feel. And therefore, no one wants to be around us. We need to just hide away, which is the worst thing we can do, because then all we're left with is our thoughts. And those ruminating thoughts are exhausting and very hard to challenge when you are alone and feeling low. So that was the idea behind starting Hope in Depression. And we were a 4-week course initially. And I expanded it and developed it with bringing in different speakers. So we have week 1, we talk about depression and anxiety, and I tell my story, and my husband, who's a supporter, tells his story, because that's the uniqueness of Hope in Depression. We are for supporters and for sufferers, because it was hard for him. The wife he married became a little bit unrecognizable there for a while. So he needed to know how to support me and support himself, because it was hard for him. So that's what happens in week 1. And the discussions start around the table and the relatability starts to happen. And then week 2, we have therapy. So that's looking at integrative therapy. So that's taking into account all forms of therapy, empowering people with the choices that they can make about their own mental health recovery journey, and what their rights are. That they're entitled to 12 sessions through the NHS, but they will only be offered 6. These are important things that we just don't know. And then week 3, we have a psychiatrist and a GP talking about brain chemistry and medication, why medication works, how it works, how the brain goes through this change when we're depressed, what's lacking. And then week 4, it's nutrition, which is brilliant, because I learned something bringing this speaker on the course, which was serotonin is produced in the gut. And therefore, if you're not eating right, so when you're anxious, maybe you're eating too much of the wrong things, or when you're anxious, you're eating nothing. And that's going to exacerbate that anxiety and that feeling of low mood. So having our nutritional speaker, nutritional therapist on was amazing. And then we have in week 5, it's mindfulness, which is given by Suzette Jones, who is a Christian mindfulness instructor. And she just brings in that whole, let's bring the mind focus into one thing instead of going off. And we train our brains to do that instead of having this kind of out of control sensation. So breathing exercises, etc. We also have a discussion on anxiety that week. That's really helpful, marrying those two together. And then the final week is fitness and exercise, how that can improve our mood, and then how we are going to move forward with what we've learned over the previous 5 weeks. And it's an empowering education and equipping course, because it is such a powerless state that we feel when we're depressed. We want people to understand that they are a part of their own recovery. They can feel better, and there is hope.
That's I'm a bit speechless, because it just sounds, well, it is the very meaning of helping someone to overcome something, isn't it? The picture that I have in my mind is, particularly when we use the word overcome, is like a massive mountain. And it sounds like those people are at the foot of the mountain, and you've given them the food and the sustenance they need to get up there, the tools they need to get up there, the people they need to get up there, the way that they're going to be able to do it. You've given them or like the whole shebang. I can't think of a better word. Maybe one week we should have the word shebang. I don't know which guest I'd get on for that. Anyway, and that is so important, because depression is a mountain, isn't it?
Yeah.
And for some people, depression is a mountain that when you get to the top of the mountain, you can only see the next mountain. And that is something that can be so debilitating to people, just thinking, am I ever going to just feel like, oh, I've done this, I've done what I need to do, I feel free, I don't feel worried, I don't feel anxious anymore. And I think what the charity are doing is, as you said, giving people those tools, and that is amazing. But we have said that today we need to talk about all things depression. So tell me your thoughts about what it is to be not just at the bottom of the mountain, but in the pit, when you really don't think that anything is going to make a difference.
Yeah. Well, depression and anxiety robbed me of my sense of self. Everything I thought I was became a lie in my mind. I remember saying to my husband when I was poorly, I don't think I was ever happy, Brent. And that's not true. But you just don't see anything else but the black that's come over your mind and your eyes. And so it robbed me of my sense of self. It robbed me of my confidence. It robbed me of my identity as a mother and a wife. I thought I was the worst mother. I thought I was the worst wife. It just changed the real truth of who I was, because all I could see was how I felt, and how I felt was desperate. I often talk about depression almost being the wrong word for it. It should be called desperation, because it's a sense of despair, because I don't know where I went, and I wanted to bring me back, and I didn't know how to do it because I didn't know how I'd gone. I now know, looking back, just to give you a little bit of my story, I've had 4 babies, and each baby has had very traumatic circumstances attached to their birth through no fault of their own. One example is our second daughter was born 6 weeks after my mum died, age 63. I was 27. So, I was grieving. So these were kind of states of depression that we didn't recognize were actually postnatal depression. And it only came about with our 4th child, our son, Zeethan, who was born. He was born 5.5 weeks premature, but it was a sense of joy and peace and thankfulness. We had this baby boy. Life was good. My husband had a good job. Everything was great, but I crashed again. And that's when we saw this pattern of postnatal depression. But, in the midst of it, I didn't know how or why I'd gotten there throughout these bouts of and episodes of depression. So at its worst, it's minute by minute living. And I can say that when I look back on the time when Brent was working and I had the baby at home, I would look at the clock and think, I've got 4 more hours till he gets home. I don't know how I'm going to cope, and you'd look at the clock and it felt like an hour and it had moved a minute. It was that intense and that hard, almost like it was in the throes of labor pains, like gritting my teeth and carrying on and coping and coping and coping. And it became that kind of constant state of anxiety and depression became unbearable. And I talk about this on my talk in the course. And, for weeks I was like, please, God, don't let me die. Please, I've got children, I've got a husband, please don't let me die. And it flipped in one thought where I went, I cannot do this anymore. I just want to die. Please, God, just let me die. And that terrified me. And it's not because I thought about how I was going to kill myself. I just couldn't see that I could go on. And there was a documentary recently done by Roman Kemp about this national emergency, I think it was called. And he'd lost his best friend to suicide. And he interviews his best friend's mother. And she says something so profound, because I always talked about it. Like, for me, when I had those thoughts of like, God, just let me die, I wasn't thinking of my husband and children and my sister and my brothers and my father and my mum. I wasn't thinking of anyone. I was in pain and I just wanted the pain to stop. And so even the thoughts that people say they'd be better off without you, that didn't come into it. I'm going to be totally honest. I just didn't want to be here anymore because it was so painful. And so his mother in this documentary says, I understand that he wanted the pain to stop. She's talking about her son.
Yeah.
But what he doesn't realize is that the pain didn't stop. We've picked it up and we're going to carry it forever. And I just thought that is so profound, because if we think of my depression and anxiety as my pain, I got the help and I battled through and I am better. And that pain is gone. It's gone. No one else is carrying that pain. But the lie I was telling myself was I wanted the pain to stop. So let's just take my life. But actually, the pain would have divided amongst my loved ones, and they would never have been able to put that pain down. They would have carried that pain forever. And that is the trauma of suicide and the lie that we get told when we're depressed, like, just end it, end it. Actually, the pain doesn't go away. It gets handed down to our loved ones, and they carry it forever. But the truth is, the pain can stop. And the way that the pain can stop is we get the help. We recognize that this is not our fault. We have a brain, and the brain isn't well. I talk about it like it's brain flu. When I was poorly, I struggled with making the decision about how to get dressed in the morning. I would look in my wardrobe, I'd be like, oh my gosh, I don't know what to put on. And that could overwhelm me. And actually, that's because my brain wasn't well. We have this amazing image that the Mayo Clinic in America has given us permission to put in our book. And it shows a brain scan of a depressed brain and a not depressed brain. And it's absolutely fascinating. The depressed brain, the prefrontal cortex is in complete darkness. That's where we make decisions. That's where we reason. And so the truth is, my brain was poorly and I needed help. And I was embarrassed about getting help because of the stigma and the shame that I had attached to depression and anxiety. I am not ashamed that I've had depression and anxiety. I am proud that I've recovered from it. And I want other people to know that they can feel better. And that's why I run this course. And that is the truth of suicide. The pain can stop. We can stop the pain for ourselves by saying, help me, give me some help. And then we can stop the pain for ourselves. But if we go down the avenue of believing suicide's the only way out of this, the pain doesn't stop. It carries on. And it's our loved ones that carry it forever.
Wow. I could listen to you for so long. I mean, we've had the privilege of actually meeting and getting to know each other. And you're so passionate about this, and about what God has done in you and about what you're wanting to do in other people. I wanted to just go back to what you said about having your daughter, I think, when your mum died, because that happened to me too. I had my little boy and my mum died 3 months afterwards. And there's just no time to grieve, is there?
No.
And for me, Seb was my first and only child. And I had no idea what I was doing anyway. And then for mum to go unexpectedly, although she had actually had severe depression for my childhood anyway. And it's just so difficult to try and unpack all those different feelings, because you feel like there should be this joy and elation that you've got this new life, and yet you're aware that something is missing that's never going to return. I do think, I mean, I'm not sure when we're going to put this podcast out yet, but this week is Maternal Mental Health Week, and getting mums to just talk about how it feels when you have a new baby, and that there is no shame in needing to ask questions about things, and if there are other traumas that have happened to them at the same time, to get that help that you talked about. Yeah. The other thing I wanted to pick up on from what you said earlier on was you said that you tell your story and your husband tells his story. And I know that men's mental health is becoming, thankfully, so much more of a talked about subject. Can you tell me a little bit about your husband's role in hope in depression, and why he tells his story as well.
Yeah, so Brent is an amazing cheerleader for what I've been doing. He's encouraged me all the way, because I think he's as amazed as I am at the journey that we've gone on, and he was clueless, really. He'll say that in his story. The initial way that he responded to my depression and anxiety was a little bit irritated, because there wasn't anything that you could physically see that I was fearful of. And so he would also cope with it by being quiet. So when I was in my head, I was quiet, which was terrible, because I was making sense of the world in my ruminating thoughts. So he would just not talk. He would just go quiet. He'd be like, she's all right. Okay, I'll back off. Worst thing he could do. So he has learned that actually when I go quiet is when he needs to draw me out and just say, what you thinking, Lise? What's going on? And it was really, as I ran the course and recognizing the journey that he'd been on, it was exhausting for him. He had small children and a wife that was really needing him to reassure her constantly. The line he says I constantly said was, am I ever going to get better? Am I ever going to get better? And I would say it over and over and over again, because I needed that reassurance. And so that's really wearing for him, for anyone supporting anyone with depression. And so we both recognize that supporters need educating as much as sufferers, because he did say a few things wrong in those early years, and actually that's because he didn't know what he should say. And also, I think it's really important to point out, he would have been heading down the road of depression and anxiety if he hadn't have had support for himself. Someone saying to him, you know what, Brent, it's okay. I'll come and, have a coffee with Lisa, and I'll hang out with Lisa. You go and have a walk. Or, so if he tells us in his story that a friend of ours who was supporting me, he'd never met her at this point. She was supporting me, and she phoned one night, and he said, oh, do you want me to get Lisa? And she said, no, I want to speak to you. This must be really hard for you. How are you doing? And he broke down.
Yeah.
And because it is hard. He'll say it's certainly not as hard as what I was going through, but it's pretty darn hard. And so that's our uniqueness as a charity, as we are for supporters and sufferers, because we both need educating, and we both need care, and we both need to learn how to be kind to ourselves. And so that's the importance of his story, is that relatability for any supporters on the course, recognizing that they have the right to say, this is too much. I need help too. I can't do this on my own. And that's okay.
Yeah. And going back to the analogy of the mountain, when you have a mountain to climb, you don't want someone that's as equally scared as you are about going up the mountain. You want somebody who has either been up the mountain or been taught all the things that might happen as you climb it. And that won't just be the people that are supporting, but it will be charities like yourself as well. And I think it's so important to support the supporters. I mentioned that my mum had mental health throughout my whole childhood, so I was an emotional carer for my mum for most of my life, and it just wasn't recognized, because it just wasn't known about. People just didn't. Children don't have to look after their parents. Why would I ask her? If she's upset, she's probably, there's something going on about homework or something like that. And I think it's so important to ask those deeper questions. What's going on at home? What do you do after school? And if they're saying, well, I do the washing up and I do the hoovering and I just check that mum's all right and I make sure that she's got her medication, that's flags, isn't it? It's like, okay, we need to support. And the same obviously for adults, but I think recognizing that is so powerful. And again, it's the difference between climbing up a mountain and overcoming it. I was looking at the dictionary definition of overcome as well. Just bear with while I get my notes because a load of words came up. Listen to this: get the better of, prevail over, control, tame, gain mastery over, conquer.
Yeah.
I think that's a big one. Vanquish. I like that. Vanquish always makes me think of George and the Dragon for some reason.
Yeah.
Triumph over. I just think
Mm.
what you do is so very much more than just talking to people. And I think sometimes when people have mental health issues, I hear it a lot. I mean, I was watching This Is Us the other day, and the character Randall was saying, I just don't want to talk to anyone. Talking's not going to help me. I'll run. That's what I'm going to do, he said. And talking is so powerful,
Yeah.
because it's unlocking these things that,
Yeah.
as you said, when you were in the throes of depression, it was going on in your head.
Yeah.
And to be able to unlock that and open it out to people and say, this is what's going on in my head. So people say, oh, Lisa, you can't carry that on your own. It's making me emotional.
Yes.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah. I love what you're saying, because I think therapy is a stepping stone into a more sense of freedom. You know, it can clarify fear and the limits it brings on us, and it can clarify maybe lies we're telling ourselves. And my experience, and you know, I had a few light bulb moments along the years, but the most powerful for me was I believed something about myself, and it was really limiting me, because whenever it would be spoken about on television, or if I'd see it in a magazine, it could literally ruin my day, because that's all I would be thinking about was, oh my gosh, that's me. And so I mentioned it to the therapist several weeks into the process, and she said, why don't we look up the description of that word? And I said, it's too scary. Like, because if we look up that word and I see myself in it, that's it. You know, my biggest fear is realized. And so it took a few weeks for her to kind of persuade me into, you know, taking that brave step. And when I did, and she read the description of this word, it was so releasing. I sobbed, because it had imprisoned me with this control and sense of fear. And the way that I describe it is that it was like it started out as a little balloon, and this balloon just expanded and expanded and expanded. And this word was that balloon. And this balloon became bigger and bigger and bigger until it, you know, really oppressed me in my life. I was moving around this balloon, and it was slightly suffocating, but I would fidget around the room or fidget around my life, aware of this balloon. No one else could see it, but it was limiting my life and the freedom that I could live with. And so when we read that word's description, when she read it out loud, it was like she took a pin and she burst that balloon and it disappeared. And, you know, within minutes, I thought, where's it gone? And how could that have been so restrictive? How could a word and a belief I had about that word have restricted my world in that way? And that's the power of therapy. And you know, there's work involved. There is work involved. I had to be brave. I had to go through the process. I had to meet her every week. But the other side of not working was living with a balloon suffocating my life. And I know which way was the best way for me to go. And so therapy is it's a human dealing with another human, and sometimes we don't connect with humans, and that's what we do on the courses. We give people the power to realize it is okay to say to someone, you remind me of a girl that bullied me at school, or I'm not connecting with you, this isn't right, because a therapist is trained to be prepared for that. You're not going to offend them. Just say this isn't working, and then find a therapist that you do feel equal to. I think a kind of patronized relationship is not the wisest way to go through with therapy. And actually, my most successful therapist experience was when I felt she was someone I could relate to, and I didn't feel patronized by.
Yeah. I'm having just a wry smile to myself. We were talking earlier on about PTSD, and when my mum passed away, I did get some counselling, just kind of local counselling, and I had a counsellor say she didn't connect with me. In fact, she told me that she was closing her eyes and falling asleep because she couldn't relate to what I was saying.
Oh my God.
I know, but
That's appalling.
yeah, but connecting to the right person, and I
Yeah.
know that Hope and Depression are great at really looking at the whole person and what they need,
Yeah.
and that is so important. So hope in depression, I mean, that is a powerful 3 words right there.
Mm.
Just tell me about what it is to have hope in depression.
Yeah. It's everything. You know, we have to believe that this isn't our story. When you're in the midst of depression and anxiety, the hope is believing that this isn't going to be the end of my story.
Yeah,
And you know, the truth is, it isn't meant to be the end of your story. You're not well, and so get the help you need. And I promise you can feel better. But without hope, when we think that, and that's how it feels, is a hopeless state, when we feel like I'm never going to get better, which is why I kept asking my husband, am I ever going to get better? It's a horrible, horrible, terrifying state to be in, to think there is no hope. You know, we have to have hope. We have to have something to believe in, that this isn't going to be the forever journey for me. And you know, thank God it hasn't been. And you know, I could have ended it, and this wouldn't be my truth today. Um, and that would have been tragic. And for a lot of people, you know, people, when I read in the news, have taken their life, I'm so angry, because I feel like if we could have just reached them and shared the hope with them and told them they can feel better. You know, we're in a society where being feared about being sued as a doctor possibly stops GPs saying that. They don't want to be held accountable for that statement. You can feel better, but I promise you, you can feel better. It's peaks and troughs. It's that mountain journey, isn't it? You're on the
yeah,
top, and then you go in the valley again, and those dips get less and less deep, and they don't feel as traumatic, because you can see the peak again. You can get back up there. We know what we need to do to climb up that mountain. And you know, analogies are really powerful, and pictures are really powerful. And you were talking about the analogy of the mountain. When I have a wobbly day, Brent is my map reader. He knows how to get back on top of that mountain. So I'll come to him and say, I don't feel right, you know, and then he'll go, well, what's happened? What have you read? What's has someone said anything to you? Like, I don't like being shouted at, you know. Sometimes that can happen, like, you know, I don't know, you park badly and someone will shout. He'll go back through, like, what's happened, or I've read an article that's been really upsetting, and so he'll go, well, of course, what you're feeling is natural, Lisa. That's a distressing story you read. And then he's the mapper saying, come out of this valley, let's get back up on top of that mountain. And so that's where the kind of, you know, support can be so powerful. And you know, takes us back to why the course works, is that when we walk around on our own with those ruminating thoughts in our heads, we are on our own, and we're feeling hopeless and desperate. By having someone in a group of strangers where you can be real and say, do you know what? It's been a really awful week, or I'm not coping, or I don't know if I can go on. And someone saying, how are you? No, how are you really? Happens in the group. It's community. It's powerful. It even happens on Zoom. And that's what we need to do, is to be in relationship with each other. We are not called to be isolated, lonely individuals. We are meant to be talking to people. And what the course is, I often talk about the I'm fine mask, you know, the asking, how are you twice.
yeah,
When we say I'm fine, you know, I walked around when I was ill with that I'm fine mask saying, yeah, I'm fine, until that mask became too heavy to carry. And then everybody knew I was ill, because I couldn't hide it. You know, I was crying in grocery stores, I was struggling. And we want to make a space for people where they can put that mask down and enter the room. It used to be live courses, it was a real room. Now it's a Zoom room. And say, do you know what? I'm not fine. I'm really struggling. I don't know if I can go on. What can I do? and normalizing that and saying to them, I totally get that you feel that way, but you can feel better, and we're here for you. You're not alone. That's what we want to produce. What we want to create is that community of normalizing their experiences and giving them their tribe, find their people where they can be really them and honest about how they're feeling.
Yeah, we done previous podcasts on connection, and connection is so important. Just as you said, finding your tribe, and just going back to masks this year and last year of all years, knowing how much people hate wearing masks, how it can just stifle you. You can't see emotion in the same way. It can be uncomfortable. And I think sometimes when you've worn a mask for so long, you forget all those things until you take it off.
Yeah.
Gonna get emotional again. What are you doing to me? But it's true. It's true. People don't realize that they're walking around with these, this cloud over them until somebody kind of says it's all right. I see it, and we're going to overcome it.
Yes,
together.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Before I break down completely, we come to the point where I write you a rhyme or a verse. So I'm just going to take a breath. It's just a step, a tiny step. I know it seems so high, but just be brave. I'm here to save. We'll do this, you and I. That's what I'm going to manage.
Oh, so lovely, Carol. Thank you.
Short and sweet.
Love that.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. I talk about people coming on the course and they come through the door and they're on their knees. And what we're doing is we're helping them back to their feet. And, I feel that's where God comes in. He helped me back to my feet by putting people in my path, in my way, therapists and actually, isn't that God? That's the God that we know. He took the worst experience in my life and he got me to put my mask down, lifted the shame off my shoulders and gave me a purpose. And that purpose that I live with, giving people hope that they can feel better, is a purpose that then gets passed down to other people on our course. They come on the course and they go, I have a story to tell. And then they become a course leader or they become a facilitator and they become a part of the solution, because the problem is out there. And with COVID, it's bigger and we're ready. What I'm trying to do is to get an army behind us to help us fight this battle, to be a part of the solution. And so as a charity, we've made a decision to not charge church partners for the course, for people to come on board as volunteers within their church communities and provide their community with this support. And that's for all faiths and none. This is a way for church to be equipped with dealing with this problem that they would have had for years, people coming in and saying, help me. We want to equip church staff and church congregation members with the tools and techniques to know what they can say and how they can help people that are struggling and practically show Christ's love. We're Good Samaritan charity. We come alongside people of all faiths and none. We're not evangelists. We are literally practically showing Christ's love to anyone. And it's only through God in us that we're able to love strangers as much as we do. I've done this for years for free because I don't want anyone to suffer the way I suffered on my own. I've given my life's work to it now because I know people's lives can be better. And suicide isn't the answer. It is a temporary solution. Sorry, it's a permanent solution to a temporary problem. It's permanent and it doesn't need to be, because this is a temporary journey and you're going to come out that valley and get back on top of that mountaintop. And you deserve to be there. Yeah.
Let's see more and more overcomers in the future. Lisa, thank you so much. It's been emotional, but I expected nothing less. And when you're talking about things like this, it's important to be real. It's, as we said, it's that taking that mask off and being real with each other. We will make sure that we put all of your details in the show notes. People listening, it's just a step. You can do this. Please reach out to somebody. We'll leave all Lisa's details so you can get in touch with Hope in Depression, or just talk to somebody that you know. But please do. We often have fun challenges, creative challenges. This is an important one. Please talk to somebody and get the help that you need if you feel that you need it. And if you are in a great place, then please share this podcast with someone else that you know needs it. And be that ear, be that person, that asks more than once if somebody is okay. Lisa, thank you so much. This has been a real challenge, but such an important thing to think about.
Yeah.
Thank you
Can
again.
I finish by saying one thing, actually?
Please do.
So I just want to say to anyone listening, you matter. You matter to me. You matter to Carol. You matter. You're uniquely created to be a part of this world. We need you. Keep going. And life is to enjoy, not endure. I promise you, it's to enjoy. And you will get to feel better. I just want to finish with that.
That's a perfect way to finish. Thank you so much, Lisa.
Thanks, Carol.
A final thought from Seb.
Sometimes we need assistance and sometimes we need independence.
Thank you for listening to the Raise podcast. We hope you feel raised and inspired by this episode. Whilst we're not offering face-to-face classes currently, we are doing online singing lessons where you can have your voice raised as well as your confidence. If you would like to find out more, please visit our website at www.raiseforall.com or find us on social media on either our Facebook or Instagram page. Take care.